speaking of them Canes, we now bring in on the Baptist Health Hotline the man who does pre and post for the Miami Hurricanes on the Miami Hurricanes Radio Network. He also is the host of Locked On Canes and co-host of Locked On ACC. The Don, Alex Donno, joining us here on a Wednesday. Appreciate you pulling up, Alex. And also, Donno, man, when we talked back in Charlotte, we both felt good about the Canes, but there's no way we thought it would look this savory for Miami this early in the season. How's it going, man?
Yeah, no doubt. Thank you for having me, Theo. And, I'm usually pretty bullish on Miami regardless, but they've exceeded my expectations so far in some key areas. I expected the offensive line to be really good, so that's not a huge surprise. Defensive line has been even better than I thought so far. You talk about bouncing back into form. Ruben Bain, who had a difficult season last year, he missed basically 5 games with injury because he got hurt on like the first play of the Florida game, missed the next 4 games after that. And then, wasn't really fully healthy when he returned from injury last year. It was kind of a forgettable year based on Bain's standards, right? It was not up to par with what he'd done the previous year. He's looking better than ever in his 3rd year. Like he's been basically unblockable. And then, for as much extra attention as opposing O-lines would like to put on Bain, the guy on the other side is playing almost just as well in Akeem Mesidor. The Hurricanes defensive tackles, they've got a tighter rotation in the interior, but they've been doing really well. Ahmad Moten is off to a good start this year. Justin Scott has made some plays, David Blay. So the defensive front has exceeded my expectations. And then I think it's fair to say Carson Beck. Yeah. Carson Beck has been better than a lot of folks expected so far. And the receivers he's connecting with, it's like you've got 2 true freshmen that are balling, Malachi Toney, and then Josh Moore had a big game against USF, and CJ Daniels, 6-year senior transfer from LSU, has been great so far. Keelan Marion had a great game against USF. So for Miami, like 3 games in, it feels like just about everything's been working for them.
What I love about early on what we see out of the Canes, Donno, and you laid it out so perfectly, is not only have you seen the dominance that they showed against USF at home, you also saw what it would look like in a contentious, not back and forth, but at least a tight game in that opener against Notre Dame, against a championship contender. And it was like, okay, you can trust Beck when it's close. You can trust that defense in a fourth quarter when you need key stops, but you also can trust them to go out against the group of 5 team and look dominant and look like the squad that has potentially 3 or 4 first-round picks in the upcoming draft. Like, it's hard not to feel great about Miami, but is there any worry from you? Is there any way in this world, because I just made personally a bet here at ESPN West Palm that I absolutely do not want to see out, which would be me having to spend the entire day with Russo and Rizzo from 4 to 6, pick them up, bring them to work, talk to them all day, and sit in on their show. If the Canes lose this weekend, is there any way in which you think the Gators actually have somewhat of an edge on Miami at Hard Rock this weekend?
So here's what I'll say about that. Florida has too much talent to be 1-2 at this point, specifically the USF loss at home. It's inexcusable in a lot of ways. And it was a lot of self-inflicted wounds, not punching in the red zone, having multiple, would have been touchdowns taken back because of penalties. Penalties like you got a player spit on somebody in your final defensive stand for 15 yards. You were having some success in the running game. You went away from it. DJ Lagway is struggling so far this year. So, what I would say about Florida is I think talent-wise, they're much better than a 1-2 team. So I guess, if I'm going to play devil's advocate here, what would I be concerned about on the Miami side is obviously this is a rivalry game. So, whether or not the Gators are still playing for their coach, because everyone's putting Billy Napier on the hot seat again, they're going to get up for a game like this because so many of these players played high school ball with each other in some cases, against each other, seen each other in state championships and stuff. So if this becomes the first game of the year I don't really count the Long Island game, but if this becomes the first game of the year where Florida can have, close to a mistake-free game and cut out the self-inflicted wounds, I think Florida is capable of hanging in with Miami. But so many self-inflicted wounds to this point, and DJ Lagway is really struggling to see the field. Like, it makes you wonder how much of this stuff is just going to plague them for the entire year. So that's something I would say for Florida. I mean, if I look at individual matchups, I would give Miami the edge in most spots, but Florida is good at the lines of scrimmage. Now they're going to be without their top defensive lineman arguably in this game due to injury, which is unfortunate for them. But they've got a good offensive line. How are they going to hold up against Bain and Mesidor? We'll find out. And, if DJ Lagway performs the way that he did down the stretch of last season, they got some weapons at receiver like Vernell Brown, their freshman receiver, who's off to a great start this year. So, they have talent that can absolutely challenge Miami. The other thing I would say for Miami, as good as it's been so far, and I don't know if this is going to be the game where they face this scenario, Miami has not trailed yet in a game this year. The closest they've been to trailing was tied 24, late in the game against Notre Dame, but Miami has not trailed at any point in a football game this year. So if that were to happen against Florida, how does this group respond when, you're calling different plays when you're behind and maybe your pass rush can't pin their ears back the same way if you're playing from behind in a game. So that's a question that's not been answered for this team yet. But just based on the way both teams are playing 3 games into the season, you have to feel pretty good about Miami's chances.
I certainly do. And again, we have the preeminent voice on the Miami Hurricanes football team, Alex Donno. He does pre and post for Miami Hurricanes on the Miami Hurricanes radio network, as well as Locked on Canes and Locked on ACC. I feel confident in the Canes. One thing that someone pointed out to me was, yes, Lagway threw 5 picks last weekend against LSU, which is an incredible number. But also, last year for Georgia against Florida, Carson Beck threw 3 of them things over the middle, most of them. Could that be a thing that ails him? Because he had a couple of turnovers this past weekend.
Yeah, I think last season, a lot. He threw 12 picks last year. Beck, 3 of them in that game is something he's trying to put behind him. I know that there's been a big emphasis for Beck this year, trying not to force too many footballs. And I think he did, like the first interception that he threw against USF, Miami was trying to get like a dagger touchdown before halftime, and he admits he did get hit on the throw, but that he forced it. Probably shouldn't have thrown that football. I don't really fault him for the second interception because it was actually intended for a different receiver. It was intended for Tony Johnson, but Malachi Tony, who's got that crazy 50-inch vert, just kind of jumped up and tried to snag it for himself, and that deflected
Alex,
for the interception.
Is that serious? Is that a real number, 50-inch vertical, or are you just saying that as hyperbole because the dude is athletic as all get up?
I'm actually quoting Carson Beck. Carson Beck said after the game 50-inch vert. So that if it was hyperbole, it was hyperbole on his part, not mine. I'm quoting Beck. I don't know. You might have like a 44-inch vert. I don't know what it is.
I would believe
like
it.
50 on that play.
I believe it. That dude is incredible.
Yeah,
that dude is incredible.
Yeah.
He's still 17. Can you just talk about Malachi Tony for a second here? For people that haven't watched him, I have been saying that it feels like he laced up his cleats and he said, again, this is specifically just on field. He said, like Mike, I want to be like Tyreek Hill. And he looks like the number 10 in South Florida. That is the elite wide receiver. Moves so quick. He's great at getting separation and getting to the football, and he has great hands. What have you seen out of that dude that makes you feel like Miami has a spectacular receiver for the next 3 years?
First of all, for him to be where he is as an early enrollee true freshman, he's an incredibly hard worker, Theo. I mean, his route running, the precision, he was outstanding in training camp. So I guess it's not that surprising that he's doing what he's doing because he practices the way that he plays. And I don't think there's any moment that's too big for him. I mean, you saw, he led Miami in receiving and scored a touchdown against Notre Dame in a top 10 matchup to open the season. It doesn't get much bigger than that. But this is also a player who, when he was in high school at American Heritage, his final season there, he was a wide receiver, but their quarterback, Dia Bell, was hurt before the playoffs, and Malachi Tony, they convert him to quarterback, and they win a state championship. And it's not like he was only just taking off and running; he was throwing dimes as well in the state playoffs. So, I don't want to take anything away from his work ethic because it takes more than just athleticism to be where he is. He also works incredibly hard at his craft, but he of course has abilities that are just not natural to most human beings, but he also puts in the work to get there and to get on the field quickly. So Malachi has been absolutely tremendous. And you think about like how spoiled Miami fans are to go from, Xavier Restrepo, who was, one of the best in the history of the program when it comes to slot receivers, and then to be able to replace him immediately with a guy like Malachi Toney, who is going to end up being just as good, if not better, at Miami. Like, it's very, very fortunate, the situation. And I don't think it's a coincidence because, A, Mario Cristobal works so hard to recruit these players, and B, offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson, wherever he's been, he's always gotten the most out of slot receivers. You see what Malachi Toney is doing already this year, what Restrepo did under Dawson the previous couple of years, and then he had Tank Dell at Houston. So slot receivers always eat in a Shannon Dawson offense.
Man, this dude is working his magic, but also the talent he's been able to work with is incredible. Tank Dell, Restrepo, and then now we have Malachi Toney. You brought up a great point there. When I watched the videos of Toney throwing the quarterback for American Heritage last year, again in a state championship run, he looks like a quarterback prospect. Like he looks like he could have been recruited as a quarterback and probably played Division I football at that. And he's a wide receiver. It makes me think if somewhere down the line we have some crafty trick plays drawn up for him, man. But again, Alex Donno joining us here from Locked On Canes, talking some Miami Hurricanes football. You said that this is the best you've kind of felt about a Canes team in recent years this early in the season. What do you feel like is the now newly minted realistic ceiling for this team? The number 4 in the nation. I think we all expect them to make the 12-team college football playoff. They still got to seal the deal. But how high do you think that Canes fans should actually feel this Canes team can actually reach to now?
I think they should win the ACC championship based on what we've seen so far. And if they do that, you get a good seed in the playoffs. You win a couple playoff games, win a playoff game or two. Like I don't necessarily think this team is going to win the national championship. I still look at Ohio State as probably the team to beat, but I think Miami is a lot more in that mix as a team that can make a deep run. And especially the ACC feels so wide open. Clemson does not look good. I mean, I get it. Dabo and Dabo's defending himself in the media. Like, look at all the winning I've done. He's a little thin-skinned Dabo. Like, not denying he's done incredible things there for the past decade plus at Clemson, but they don't look like themselves. They're already 0-1 in the ACC. Georgia Tech has a pretty easy schedule the rest of the way after beating Clemson. So Georgia Tech is in pretty good position to get to the ACC championship game. And then obviously Miami and Florida State are the other teams that are right in the mix. Miami looks the best out of the entire ACC so far. Miami versus SFU and versus FSU in a couple of weeks could end up being like an elimination game for the ACC championship game. But based on what we've seen, I think Miami should win the ACC championship, and then you get into the playoffs. And I think this team, it looks like the defense looks considerably better than it was last year. I think this should be a team that can make a run into the CFP.
Definitely feels that way, and all you got to hope is that this weekend they get it done. It's kind of one of those one step at a time things, especially as Canes fans, especially after we saw how last season kind of went down. But again, Alex Donno, you can find him on Twitter at Alex Donno. Follow his work at Locked On Canes and at Locked On ACC, and you hear him for the Miami Hurricanes post-game show on the Miami Hurricanes Radio Network. Alex, thanks for your time, and we will make sure to catch up with you again next week, hopefully talking about a Canes win.
Hopefully. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great show.
Thank you. That is Alex Donno, the man, the myth, the guy who has all things Miami Hurricanes. CCAT,